Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio In, and I have the TANCHJIM MINO TWS earphones. And I recently did a separate unboxing and first impressions video of the Minnow, and I commented that I think I prefer the tuning of the Moondrop space travel over the Minnow, but I did still need more time to compare them. Well, I have spent some time doing just that, but also just messing around with the TANCHJIM app. I played with the different EQ settings, and really I just tried to get a feel for the whole TANCHJIM MINO experience. So as usual, we'll go over the specifications, features, and design, and then I'll share my experience with the TANCHJIM MINO. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Now again, I've already done a separate unboxing video for the Minnow, but I went ahead and put everything out on my desk that you get in the box. Now, these are priced at $42, so as TWS earphones go, they are fairly inexpensive. There are less expensive options out there, but there are also much more expensive sets as well, and I would still consider this more of a budget set. But you get a pretty decent feature set for that $42 price, including Bluetooth 5.3, active noise canceling, and with the TANCHJIM app, you can also choose between 5 different EQ presets, not including the default setting, or you can also create your own customized EQ. As for battery life, the earphones themselves should give you about 5 hours of playback time, and then the case should give you roughly 6 full charges. So in total, you should be able to get about 30 hours of playback time if the case is fully charged. So that's not bad. It also has ear detection, so it will pause the music when you take them out of your ears and then resume the music when you put them back in. You can also customize the touch controls, so you can choose which earpiece you want to use to control a specific function. The case is also decent. The Type-C charging port is located on the bottom. It's pretty compact, and while it is kind of simple looking, I do like that all of the edges are rounded, because that way it's just a little less noticeable when it's in your pocket. It's also light and protective, but the bottom line is it does do everything it's supposed to do. I do also quickly want to mention that I didn't have much luck with the included tips, because even the largest tips weren't really big enough to give me a proper seal. Not a huge deal, because I do have a pretty decent little selection of SpinFit ear tips, and at first I tried the Omni tips because they usually work great on most other TWSs, but only if they have the smaller nozzles. I think they have to be smaller than 5.5 millimeters, and I quickly realized they wouldn't fit on the Minnow, but then I just grabbed some of my W1s and they worked perfectly fine. But just something to bear in mind if you usually use large or even extra large ear tips like myself. But again, once I switched over to the W1s, I was able to get a nice seal and a pretty comfortable fit. Okay, let's move on to the sound. So before we jump in, I quickly want to talk about the different EQ settings because I did test those, and for the most part, to be honest, I just didn't really care for most of the other EQ options. I think the only other preset that sounded okay to me was the balanced sound EQ, but I just ended up doing most of my listening and testing in its default mode, which was fine because I actually thought it was tuned quite nicely, especially considering it's a budget TWS set. Speaking of which, the Minno has what I would consider to be a pretty neutral signature, but there is a little extra mid-range forwardness that can sometimes push vocals, again, a little more forward, but it's not so forward as to throw things too far out of balance. Although I do think the Moondrop Space Travel is a little more balanced, but we'll come back to comparisons near the end. But basically you have a neutral presentation with some mid forwardness. But to break things down a little further, starting with the bass, because of its more neutral signature, the bass is going to land a little more on the polite side. So there is good bass presence, but like the rest of the tuning, it has a more neutral presentation. And it seems like my attention was drawn maybe a little away from the bass and more towards the upper mids, which was fine, I guess. I do wish there was a little more bass energy. That being said, the bass presentation overall is clean as far as control and how they transitioned out of the bass into the lower mids. And it also has pretty decent dynamics as well. So I'm getting nice amounts of slam and impact from kick drums. And then as you move into the mids, again, they did a pretty good job of maintaining control with the transition out of the bass into the lower mids, which means they've managed to keep the lower mids pretty clean, and you don't have to worry much about bass bleed. My only nitpick would be that it can sound just a little lean or thin in the lower mids at times, and it's not giving me as much richness and note weight that I would have liked to hear in male vocals or some of the other instruments that might land there. And then moving a little further up into the mids, again, we have quite a bit of upper mid-range energy that gives vocals that attention and center focus they need. There's also still enough bass energy to keep everything in balance for the most part. And we talked about how I do wish there was just a little more bass energy in the Minno, and I also feel like the Space Travel is just a little closer to what I would consider to be more balanced. But what I really like about the Minno's upper mid-range is how natural it is, especially again for a TWS set. Now, as far as the treble, in terms of treble energy, it's fine. I think it's generally close to where it should be, although when it's combined with that upper mid-range energy, the Minno's overall presentation can come across as a little bright depending on what you're listening to. But it wasn't overly bright necessarily, at least not to the point of it becoming fatiguing. Now, as far as its technical performance, as usual with a budget TWS set, it was just okay. I would say the best part of its technical performance was the detail and the soundstage width. Those were both pretty good. Where it seemed to lack was in the forward depth and the instrument layering. Imaging was also pretty good, at least when it came to the positional cues. For the most part, you could tell where the instruments were supposed to be from left to right. But again, it just didn't have much in terms of forward depth. Now, as for whether or not I feel the TANCHJIM MINO is competitive or is a good value, well, right now, my favorite budget TWS is the Moondrop Space Travel. First of all, because it's tuned exceptionally well, not just for a TWS, but even just for a budget IEM. But secondly, it's only 25 bucks. So it's about 17 bucks cheaper than the Minno. And while it may not have as many features as the Minno, it still sounds just as good and maybe even a little smoother and more natural in the treble. And its technical performance is also about the same. That being said, again, the Minno does sound great, and it does give you better battery life, 30 hours of playback compared to the Space Travel's 12 hours, I believe. And it also does add the custom EQs plus even more EQ presets. So if those are important features for you and you feel they're worth that extra money, then maybe the Minno would be a good fit for you. I don't necessarily need those features. And again, I also just prefer the Space Travel's slightly smoother, more natural presentation. So most of the time, I'm just gonna reach for the Space Travel. That being said, I do feel like the Minno overall is a pretty good value. Again, it's just I know there are better sets out there for cheaper. So again, you kind of have to decide for yourself if those features are worth that extra money for you. So that concludes my review of the TANCHJIM MINO. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.